Welcome everyone to MailFuzz TV. I am Peter and today I'm going to be talking about the Pitt Season 2 Episode 1. It's 7 AM, spoilers as always, and this is a Patreon sponsored review, so thank you very much to Alison for making the pick. So, yeah, we're back. It's July 4th, which means I expect some firework disasters and injuries by the end of the shift, by the end of the season, but obviously we're starting at 7 AM, so I don't think anyone's quite got that underway just yet. But we have some new characters to talk about, we have some directions to talk about, we got a stinky man, we got a baby, we got all sorts of stuff going on. So I think up front, they give, more of the characters, I think, a bigger entrance, at least from what I remember from the start of season 1. Obviously, it's been a few months since I watched that episode now, but like Robbie, I remember getting an entrance where he comes in with the headphones. I mean, here he comes in with a motorbike. But I feel like Dana got a big entrance here in Langdon, which I guess because those are the two that might not be back in plot, reasons. Like, he might be gone because of what he did. This is actually his first day back, which is kind of a smart way to kind of frame it as like, hey, this is his first time back on the job after the fallout of what he was doing. And Dana is back as well. But we got we got some new student doctors. We've got a new nurse character to talk about, and then perhaps the biggest new character to talk about is the person who's going to be filling in for Robbie because he's going on a sabbatical for 3 months. He says he's leaving tonight, although I suspect he's not going to be leaving at the time that he expects that he's going to be leaving, just because things are probably going to happen that keep him there a little bit longer. But that's really the biggest talking point, I think, coming out of this first episode, is the button heads, the differences between him and our new character, Dr. Al Hashima, who I've heard a couple of people definitely call her just Dr. Al at some point, so I'll probably just go with that for quickness sake. But she immediately is very different to Robbie, and as soon as they meet each other, in fact, even before they meet each other, he comes in and people mention to him, oh, your replacement's already here. She's already been around and she's already talking to some of the students and stuff. And he's like, oh, it'd have been nice to get, talk to about that first. And he kind of says that to her. So there's instant tension between them, like the second they start speaking to each other. They give her kind of an entrance as well, where she's got like the various students doing like a test, like a practice run on a dummy. And they fail, right? And this is where we get introduced to a lot of the characters again, some of the new ones. But all throughout the episode, like when they're actually treating a patient and they've got this guy open, like I swear they just had this guy completely open and they were like having their hands around the lungs and the everything else in there, just going around all the organs. It just felt like a big pit of mush, to be honest. Like how they were making heads or tails of anything in there, I don't know. But I'm not a doctor, so that's okay. I don't need to know. But during this sequence, there was multiple times where they were talking over each other, where they'd be giving contradicting advice to the students. There was moments where they were bumping into each other because they were both trying to look at the same thing. They were both leaning the same way and they'd bump. There was constant just clashing and rifting throughout. And then on top of all that, she's got all these crazy new ideas. Like she comes in here with all these ideas of efficiency, and here's the things that I've done at the VA hospital, stuff that I think will make things better here, better satisfaction for the patients, more efficiency, all that stuff. And she's introduced a couple of things like patient passports, which are like a card with a bunch of info on it that they have to like keep with them, and like it's meant to give like sort of estimates of how long they'll be there and stuff like that. And immediately, having watched season 1, I'm like, this sounds completely unfeasible. I don't know how that you could possibly keep track or actually adhere any of the doctors to what's on these cards. It sounds like more busy work that actually isn't of use to anyone, except for the semblance of more efficiency, the upper management, and it sounds like Gloria probably is going to love this woman because she wants those satisfaction rates up and all this other stuff. So it sets all this up. There's even talk about her wanting to implement AI in some ways or whatever. So that's obviously very topical. I feel like we're going to be hitting on that subject a bit harder late in the season. It's probably going to lead to something bad at some point. Now, don't get me wrong. I suspect this, she is clearly a very experienced doctor, and I suspect that we're also going to see her strengths throughout this season. I have no doubt of that. But up front, it feels like she's not used to working in this type of VR, and she's coming in with all these ideas that don't really gel with how anything actually works here. Now, that's not to say that nothing should change. Maybe there are things that could be improved. But she even wants to like start a campaign. Like even just that sentence, "I want to start a campaign," just kind of feels like you're not really settled in here yet. But she wants to start a campaign to rename, or to at least dissuade people from calling this place the Pit, because it lowers morale and expectations because it's seen as this negative place, whereas Robbie thinks it's got like a a bit of a charm to it, or whatever. So I like that was the big thing coming out of this episode, really, was how much, especially in the first half, they really hit the differences between these two characters. And simple little things where she tells the doctors a solution rather than them trying to guide them to figuring that solution out on their own. And that's what Robbie immediately says to her. So I think one thing I'd want to be careful of here, though, is because she is the new character, because she is the external character coming in and interfering with this family of weirdos that I've already gotten used to from season 1, it's very easy to kind of see her as the villain or the antagonist in a lot of ways. And I think it probably bears a little bit of a moment to just breathe and say, hey, she's probably actually a pretty decent human being, but she's obviously not as experienced here. It's probably in some ways a little similar to like the eagerness of Santos in some ways. There's kind of this ambition that maybe gets a little bit in the way of just like, taking in what's around you and being the best you can be. It's not the exact same, and I think the flip of this actually is the other, not the new doctor, but the new nurse, Emma, I believe was her name. I actually think they did a good job with her of showing kind of the other end of the spectrum of like, she comes in, and when she first meets Dana in the night shift charge nurse, she's got like all this. She's got like it's not a tool belt. It's like a medical belt with like tools in it, and she's got like various contraptions like she's holding. Like it's like someone who showed up for school and thought they needed every single type of like pencil and pen and every everything they could possibly need potentially in a day in a classroom. It's kind of like that, but for a hospital, where she's shown up with every single little thing she thinks she needs to carry. And Dana just like sort of quietly says, "I'll take all this stuff and put it behind the desk." And it's showing you this over-eagerness, but it's very much different to the overconfidence of like, say, Santos. This is more like nerves and like over-preparing, and but again, the advice is honestly kind of similar, which is just breathe and take in what your surroundings are and listen to the people around you, and you'll be fine. It's the other end of the spectrum, but the end advice in a lot of ways is kind of feels like the same to me. But so we've got a new nurse. I don't know if we call her a trainee nurse or it's just the start of her job as a nurse. I'm not sure in the terminology always, but she's there, and kind of is Dana is the one mainly kind of taking her under the wing. And she has no idea how to react to Dana's like humor, and like, because Dana at one point is like, "So tell me about yourself, Emma. You got siblings? What your parents like? You got a boyfriend? Ever rob a store?" So I can't remember what she even said, but she said something silly at the end, and like Emma was like a deer in the headlights, and I'm just like, it was a joke. It's okay. It's okay. It was a joke. So yeah, we got like some new characters introduced. The other, like the new like year 1 medical students or whatever the terminology is, we don't get a whole lot of them, right? We do get a little bit of attitude from them. The guy feels like he's kind of, there's a guy with long hair and then there's an Asian girl, right? And I feel like there's a bit of attitude for both of them where he kind of like underestimates what's going to happen, which is actually really cool because it shows that how like experienced Whitaker is like over these past like 10 months or whatever, where Whitaker is the one now saying, "Oh, they checked the all the beds of the elderly at this time, so we're expecting a rush." And the guy doubts it, but then sure enough, they come in and Whitaker's the one saying, "Let's take a moment of silence. No, we don't leave him and get new patients. Stay here and watch this old man pass away." Like he's sort of putting them through a lot of the lessons that he learned in his first day, but he's also learned from his first day because he tells them to silence his phone. Not that Samira took that advice to heart. Her phone's going off willy-nilly when she's performing surgery early in the episode. But yeah, so I like all that stuff. I like Whitaker being a bit more confident. I like Whitaker showing that he knows what he's doing. But there's also that moment with the new girl there who basically just says when they start the surgery, "Oh, it doesn't matter anyway, he's already dead." Like she basically just writes him off. And there's a little moment where you can just see someone look over, you know, I think it's Robbie who hears that and doesn't like grill her for it, but you can sort of tell like, he's taking a mental note of that and he's going to have a talking to her later. I feel like her enthusiasm of like the attitude of thinking that this guy's a goner before they've even tried to do anything seems like something they have to stamp out a little bit. They almost like these two new characters both feel a little bit like I don't know, like the type of teenager who just like thinks everything's a waste of time. I don't know, they've got a little bit of that energy, I guess, and I'm kind of curious to see how we develop that throughout the season. But so we got that going on. Like I said, Whittaker feels like he's a lot more confident. There's a nice little thing in the start of the surgery scene where someone's talking about Garcia and says, "Oh, Garcia, you know, isn't always good at telling you her feelings or something like that." And Whittaker says, "Oh, not all of them." And then we find out what he's referring to, where Garcia's pissed off that he has used her toothbrush. What's so good about this exchange is that it actually advances a couple of things that were dangling from last season. One, it tells us that, yeah, he probably is still staying with Santos, which was set up at the end of the last season. But the fact that he's had like an infraction, he's crossed paths with Garcia in his living condition also tells you that Santos and Garcia have seemingly started off a relationship of some kind, and Garcia's spending time there as well. So, you know, it advanced a couple of things in a very quick line of dialogue, which I thought was very efficient of the writing. So that's good as well. So yeah, I'm just like, there's so many characters to go through and talk about. Langdon's back. And I wasn't even sure if he was here as a doctor first because he was out in the waiting area, but he was just kind of waiting to get clearance to come in, but it is his time to come back. It's his first day back. There's a lot of humbling of Langdon, where he goes to his locker and the code doesn't work, but he checks the letter again, like his welcome back letter or whatever, and realizes, oh no, my locker's down here now. And not that it really makes that much difference that his locker's, you know, on the under level, but it's just kind of a little symbolic visually. And there's like moldy old food in there because no one's used this locker in a long time. It's like it's just a little moment, and he wants to reconnect with Robbie. Robbie just doesn't want to talk to him. There's a great little line of dialogue where he's like, hey, can we just promise to talk later? And Robbie just reiterates the line that he already said, which is not right now, implying that he doesn't want to commit to talking to Langdon. And part of that is that on Robbie's end, he thinks that he's gone after today for months, so he doesn't have to deal with any of this. He can just sort of like, if he can stall all this for the rest of the day, he can leave it for months, potentially, and not have to deal with this shit. So there's still kind of a rift there, and there's still this like effort of Langdon wanting to try and mend that bridge and talk to him. And I think the thing with Langdon is that we do get a scene in this episode where he tries to make right with someone else, and it's actually very sincere. And I think what's so interesting is about Langdon and Santos being the ones who were kind of paired off in that storyline last season of Santos like catching him, reporting him, and the tension that's there. And they do have a little moment of tension when they see each other again in this episode, which I wonder if we'll get some payoff to that, if we'll see some of them evolving over the course of the season. The funny thing is one of the things that I kept saying about Santos last season, and I still feel this way this episode, to be honest, even though, again, well-intentioned, I'll get into what her main plot is, but, you know, it does feel like she needs to be humbled a little bit, and I feel like with Langdon, you're seeing him be humbled throughout this episode, where he did have a bit of an attitude in season 1. It didn't necessarily feel as strong as Santos's, but he definitely was the cockier one out of the senior you know, doctors anyway. Like I think he in this episode, like between like going in and everyone seems to in some level know what he's done, but it leads to some nice moments where Dana's happy to see him and asks how he is. Some of them are very happy to see him. Like Dr. King, Mel, she like, you know, gets cheery when she sees him, and it's like one of the only times in the episode she doesn't look sad. And that's kind of nice. Whittaker's happy to see him, and that's kind of a nice moment. Like, it feels like people are generally happy to see him, and probably, I assume, they have some understanding of, like, what happened. Maybe they don't know everything, but, like, he's been gone for 10 months. Surely some version of what happened has spread around, either officially or unofficially. So I think those are good, but the scene that I'm obviously getting to is the scene where he talks to Louis, the old alcoholic, who is a very pleasant man, but he's just a chronic alcoholic. and he is in for some toothache. He's got a big kind of growth, like a big abscess or something, like right under his tooth. And Langdon's helping him out. But Langdon, after he does his initial examination, sits down and says, hey, I need to explain something to you. Because, and I didn't even see this coming because I'd forgotten that this character was related to this plot. But he specifically says, hey, when I was giving you medication about 10 months ago, I took some of the meds you were supposed to get. I stole from you. And it's very kind of like, you know, he's doing his... It feels like he's doing everything right. And, you know, as much as, like, last season, he was trying to, like, ask Robbie to not report it and, like, help him in, like, a more, you know, low-key way. Maybe you could look at that and say he was trying to skirt the proper, like, you know, walk of shame, if you will, of, like, having everyone find out what he's done and having to go through the process properly and officially. But this feels like, you know, in this time between seasons, he's went through a lot of this process, and he is at this point where he's trying to make it right. And arguably, he doesn't necessarily have to even tell this patient this. He's choosing to do this. He's like, no, I technically stole from this man, and also I want to give him the choice of refusing me as his doctor. And Louis, and I think I never thought for a second that Louis was going to even be that mad about it. I think he just kind of is like, hey, if they helped you, like, you know, so be it. Like this guy who obviously has his own addiction, he's a chronic alcoholic, as I mentioned, like, understands it maybe more than anyone else would and is just forgiving of it. But it actually makes for a sweet scene where Langdon clearly takes what he did seriously, and the fact that he doesn't just laugh it off with Louis shows that he takes it seriously. But it's also kind of sweet that someone finally isn't giving him a hard time as well, because he's probably had a lot of hard time from, like, everyone he's had to talk to and convince that he's ready to come back to work, which he should have to do, but you also get the mental strain that I would take at a certain point. So it's kind of nice for someone to just sort of give him a little bit of leeway here after he's already earned it, you know, by going through the process of getting his job back and being cleared for all this. So that, I mean, arguably that may be the standout scene of the episode. Honestly, is him confessing like that. It kind of almost came out of nowhere because I wasn't expecting this scene, so it hit really hard. So who else we want to talk about? Santos, right? Her whole plot this episode is a little girl who comes in. She's got like a big, like, you know, wound on her chin. They've got like a bandage and a whatever. At first I thought her chin was like getting big or something, but it's actually just like a little bit of, like, you know, they've got like some cotton wool or something under the bandage. But she, you know, she's in here because she fell down the stairs, and it's her dad's girlfriend who brought her in. The dad's away to work or whatever. And they're checking her over, and there's a big bruise on her back, and Santos is like, hey, did you also, like, hit your back as you were going down the stairs? And she's like, no, I think that was when I was playing, you know, football or something. And then she finds more bruises on her legs, several in fact, and is like, hey, what about these bruises? Is like, oh yeah, that's also when I'm playing sports or whatever. And you know, and you can tell obviously what Santos is starting to think here, right? This is looking really bad. There's a lot of bruises on this little girl. There's not a lot of, and even like the dad's girlfriend is kind of looking with a bit of a, like, a side eye, like sort of being concerned and like, oh, that wasn't expecting that. So Santos suspects something, and to be fair, and I'm not saying she's wrong to suspect something. This does look very suspicious. This is she's well within, like, exploring the possibility here. And because of the bruise in the back, they need a urine test. And, you know, when they've got the girl sort of peeing behind them, they're kind of just asking questions. You know, it's her and Perla asking questions about, hey, you know, do you ever get punished? Do you get bullied at school? Is anyone hitting you? You know, they're approaching it as sensitive as they can. And the girl very kind of calmly says, no, nothing like that for me. I get timeouts. You know, to be fair, like, I'm not a child psychologist. It sounds convincing the way she says it. It doesn't sound like she's lying, but maybe kids are just good at lying in some ways like this. Or maybe technically she is telling the truth, because obviously the other thing that she suspects, once they get the urine back, and it's, you know, it's very red looking, right? There's clearly blood in there. She suspects that there's some sexual assault elements to this as well, and wants advice from Robbie. And of course, Dr. Al also comes with them to hear this. And Robbie's like, yeah, go through what's the plan, and she's like, yeah, go, test this, get social services to talk to her and all that. And you can actually see the dad's girlfriend of this girl in the background, kind of looking over, like, oh god, what are they talking about? You can see the gears in her going. It's actually a really interesting version, because obviously we had characters last season where like, oh, this kid might be abused, and how do we like follow on from that? And Santos was even a part of that plot. I think it's very interesting to have a character who like if the dad is guilty of these things and he's done this and he's rushed off and said, hey, can you take my daughter to the hospital, it's kind of interesting he's like made this woman, this girlfriend, this seemingly innocent person, and again seemingly because we don't know everything yet, but he's made her a patsy. He's made her like, hey, you're innocent, so no one will suspect you of anything. And but because of that, like this woman who maybe is a decent human being is starting to like recognize these signs and seeing the doctors have hushed conversations with each other, and is maybe starting to think, oh god, am I like dating a monster? What's happening here? So I think that's a very interesting plot line so far. And I think Santos is right to be suspecting things in this case. I don't think she's jumping the gun by thinking them. But as with last season, we've seen that Santos can sometimes then start to take leaps because she does think something's going on. And I do wonder if there is, maybe going to be like a mistake made along the way here that maybe even gets in the way of the right thing being done because she is too gun-ho. In fact, she has a line when she's talking to Javadi's mom about how she wants to specialize in both ER and surgery. And she's like, oh, that would be very ambitious if I didn't have the talent to back it up. And she's, it's very Santos, and she's obviously like saying it out loud, but it's also like perfectly fits her character. And like her main fault is that she is like so ambitious and so gun-ho. So, they're doing a lot with her. There's a lot of weight there. Speaking of Javadi and her mum, they have not been talking, apparently. Javadi's mum's trying to talk to her because Javadi's been avoiding her and makes an excuse not to see her, even on her own birthday. Javadi's birthday, her 21st birthday, is coming up on Tuesday. So that was kind of the main thing with Javadi. She doesn't want anyone to know, but, it's going to spread, because of course it is. We've talked about Whittaker quite a bit and seeing how he's grown. King is obviously kind of out of it this episode, and it is a good contrast. I just obviously finished season 1 last week, but it's a good contrast to her season 1 plot and her characteristics, because she was so peppy, she was so eager in a very different way to Santos. Like, she's so bubbly and so like positive, and it feels like she's like the most well-intentioned person there in a lot of ways. But she looks very like, out of it, and she's not hearing things properly. She's confused. She's not confused. She's like, she's not paying attention. She's away in her own head. Something's clearly bothering her. And eventually, Santos is the one that I think that gets it out of her and says, hey, what's going on? There's something up with you today. And she's like, oh, she was mentioned in a malpractice lawsuit or something, and today's the hearing. And Santos is like, what, seriously? Like, every doctor eventually will be named in a lawsuit. Like, it's almost impossible for not to encounter a patient who's going to sue you, which is a really sad thing to say. Like, on the one hand, I think what Santos is saying is good advice, is that King shouldn't be sweating this, because every so often someone's just going, even if you've done nothing wrong, someone's going to be an asshole and want to sue you because they've got their, they're on a perch, they think they deserve more than what they got or something. They have lots of opinions about how they were treated, even if everything was done, because they weren't getting special treatment. We saw it last season about the angry guy out front who's like, I should be seen because I pay my taxes and health insurance, unlike these losers. Like, there's this entitlement that people have. Like, there's lots of reasons why someone might be suing a doctor that isn't because they did something wrong. But it's also kind of sad that it's so commonplace that Santos is like, yeah, you can't even sweat. Like, that's like a, that's a Thursday. Let's not worry about that. Like, it's going to happen like every couple of years, maybe. You don't need to concern yourself with it. It's irrelevant. And if anything, you're more protected right now because you're still, a student. You're still being trained. So the hospital kind of protects you more than if you were a full-fledged doctor. So it's like, okay. All of that was depressing, though, that we have to just kind of accept that this is the world that we're in, that like, people just make life more miserable for people who are doing this job because they have all these ideas of entitlement. Now, that's not to say that I'm sure there's occasionally good, valid reasons to try and sue like a hospital or a doctor if they do something wrong, but I don't think Mel did anything wrong. She's about his lawful good as you get on the alignment here at the hospital. But although admittedly, you can be too lawful good, and arguably that's what the new doctor is, Dr. Al. Maybe she's too lawful good in a lot of ways. She's so by the book that she's kind of ignoring like what works to do things by the letter, which again is one of those things that some people just are. So, yeah. So how else do we talk about? Samira, we mentioned briefly her phone going off. She's frustrated because she was going to take a position closer to where her mother lives so she could help look after her, but her mother's getting married and she's going on a cruise for like a year or something like that, which she's not amused about. She's like, oh, my mother's been so, like just, she's just doing things on a whim. She's judging her mother for making these big life choices and thinks that, oh, maybe it's dangerous, maybe this guy's not a good guy, maybe this and this. And Mackay clearly thinks, like this sounds nice, maybe it's love, and she's like more like lust, and like, well, that's good too. I mean, honestly, it's been a while. I could, I've got a free weekend coming up. I could be doing me getting laid. And you can tell Samira felt a little uncomfortable with Mackay just saying that. Mackay just saying, oh, I could do with getting laid this weekend. And she's like, oh, is that too much for before 8 a.m? And she's like, it's too much forever, right? Clearly, this level of casual, friendly conversation, especially talking about intimate things, is maybe a little over the line for Samira. But I do immediately think, though, that her judging her mother for doing something big with her life, something romantic, is maybe a little bit of a projection, because Samira, as pointed out in the end of last season, is Samira's not really given herself time to have a personal life and to have a romantic life because she's so focused on her work. That in some level, she's judging her mother for having something that she's denying herself in a lot of ways. Not the exact thing, but just the general idea of having time for relationships and romance, and or even just doing something spontaneous, which is not something that Samira, I get the feeling, ever does. Most doctors, I imagine, are so on call, they don't get to do a lot of spontaneous things. But yeah, so we got that. So that's where we're starting off with her character. Speaking of Cassie, Mackay, she is dealing with a patient who's got a wrist injury, although she is concerned that he might have hit his head. And he's constantly saying, oh, maybe I shouldn't go, I just want to go home, I don't want to get x-rays, don't overcharge me. And then when he's trying to like avoid getting the x-ray, she intentionally shakes his hand because she knows it'll hurt him. Not in a cruel way, but just to convince him, hey, you kind of need that x-ray. But when she has the results later and she's explaining stuff to him, he starts like kind of forgetting some of the things that he's talked about. Like he starts talking about his knee hurting, and he hadn't brought that up yet, and it seems like he had just forgotten about it, and then he doesn't know what the wrist strap thing is for his wrist, his little brace thing. And she clearly is like concerned at this point that he is completely, like he does have a head injury. There's something wrong here. And she asks him, where he is, what day it is, what year it is, and he's getting frustrated. And it's a little bit, like, he never gets like threatening or intimidating per se, but there's still like a little kind of scary factor to it that he clearly doesn't want to believe that he has a problem. So trying to convince him, and notably she does get an assistant to sort of stand outside during this conversation just in case it goes badly, and maybe they need a little bit more force to deal with him. But there's a lot of like walking around the landmines as she's trying to talk to this guy. So that was very much her plot for the episode. And like I said, they were all kind of dipping in and out and like having conversations with each other, as you'd expect. Donnie, of course, he's here and he has a baby. He's complaining about all these late nights and stuff from being a father for the first time, so that's something going on. And thematically becomes relevant because one of the big plots of the episode is that a baby is abandoned in the bathroom out in the waiting area. And they're looking for the mother, they can't find the mother. And there's a little bit of talk about, like what happens if the baby's under 28 days old versus over 28 days old as far as being abandoned goes. Like if it's over 28 days, it's a crime. If it's before, it's not. Which I guess that's like a specific American legal thing that I don't... I've heard of you can drop a baby off at a fire station or something like that. And I guess a hospital might count for this as well, given that it's a hospital. But yeah, maybe that's the 28-day rule, I guess. Oh, I keep saying 28, so I keep thinking of zombies because 28 days later. The mind's drifting here. But so they're checking the baby over. Samira is the one who's sort of given the task of actually doing a lot of the work. The episode actually ends. The episode ends with Dr. Al like coming in to check on the progress, and everything seems fine, all in the fact that a baby's been abandoned, but the baby seems in health or whatever. However, she looks at like the results of one of the tests, and Dr. Al stares daggers at this baby like she's just had like a flashback to Nam or something. It's like she is really seriously concerned about something. Now, Samira notices this and says, wait, have I missed something on the results? And she's looking back at them, and the episode actually ends on this cliffhanger. And I actually, like, part of me was thinking, okay, she's spotted something seriously wrong about the baby that's easy to miss, or something that they weren't looking for, and that's made her terrified. Or I was wondering if maybe they're doing what they did with Robbie last season, where this is giving her some like some PTSD, it's like some past trauma. Is this just like a personal thing where the baby's made her think of something in her own past? Maybe she lost the baby. We've kind of covered some of that ground before, of course, with Collins, who isn't back. But it was just the way she was staring kind of felt like, oh, is this like a personal thing she's feeling right now, as opposed to just being terrified for the baby's well-being because of something on the chart. I still think it's more likely to be a medical thing as opposed to her just having a moment because it's reminding her of something. But I do think the option's there for it to be that as well. So I'm not sure where they're going with that. But either way, this is what they chose to give us the ending moment on. So I really don't know what to say about it yet, other than just, some of the discussions about what the rules are with a baby were definitely new. And we also have a stinky man. That's what Dana and the new nurse Emma end up dealing with at one point, is they have to take the stinky man through the hospital, and everyone's just like reacting and wincing in pain as they smell this guy, and they're hosing him down. So I'm just mentioning it because the important stuff is more Dana talking to the new nurse Emma, but this is the sort of stuff that's happening throughout. I think one of the things that I liked as well about the start of the episode is Robbie's coming in before everyone else has arrived, is that a lot of the night shift are still there. And I think what was interesting about that this time is that because a lot of the night shift were around for the last like 3 or 4 episodes of season 1, I actually know who a lot of them are now. I might not remember all their names necessarily, but I know all their faces. I know them all. Like, there's the guy that's always got the iced drink, well, I do actually know his name is Shin, but like we've got all these things going on, and it was kind of interesting. Like, oh, I actually know who this night shift are that are all sort of here for a couple of minutes and saying goodbye. Versus season 1, where I didn't know anyone yet. Like, I was getting to know everyone, so like the night shift people were not even like a concern for me to try and like keep track of at that point. But yeah, so that was just a nice little thing of like this being a season 2 and like already having a familiarity with the characters. So no, but yeah, I mean, yeah. So yeah, a lot going on, a lot of stuff happening. Mateo wasn't around. I don't know if he's like officially just not back, or if he's just not back yet or something, but he didn't seem to be here in this first episode. There was maybe 1 or 2 other nurses that were around a little bit last season that aren't here now. There was one that was kind of, I won't even say flirting. There was one that didn't have that many lines but occasionally smiled at Whittaker. I don't think I saw her. And then I think everyone else seems to be back, as best I can tell. And again, there's like 30 characters. It's a lot. It's a lot to keep track of. But most people seem to be back. And I think the changes in demeanor for some of the characters. Whittaker is the one that stuck out to me the most. I mean, King as well, but King's more of like she's having a bad day, as opposed to Whittaker feels like, no, he's doing a lot of like Robbie stuff. And like Robbie watching from the background as he's like saying, no, we're going to have a minute of silence or a moment of silence for someone who's passed away. And it's just, it's what Robbie said to tell Whittaker back on his first day. The irony being is that Whittaker needed this, and that's what Robbie did that with Whittaker because Whittaker was feeling really bad about losing a patient. Here, these 2 knuckleheads, these 2 new youngins, don't seem to even give that much of a shit, but Whittaker's putting them through it anyway. He's like, no, we're going to have a moment of silence. You're going to, turn off your phones, and you're going to respect the dead, and we're doing this right now. So, but no, there was a nice little moment of, pride on Robbie's face as he heard this from the background. And just sort of continues that trend of Robbie having some respect and adoration for for Whittaker. Maybe Whittaker will become the new Robbie. He's on his path to being Robbie 2.0. But yeah, that, I believe, is the first episode of season 2 of The Pitt. A lot of stuff going on. A lot of stuff to juggle. I going into like the themes of where we're going with a lot of this stuff. Obviously, it's hard to tell that until we get maybe another couple of episodes in and we see kind of like how they're mapping out certain things. Also, Chekhov's yo-yo. No, not yo-yo. It wasn't yo-yo. Hold on. Chekhov's hula hoop. Dana, and explaining to Emma some of the she's talking about some of the signs that something might go bad with a patient, like, you know, she's got like an acronym and she's like, hey, this is looking for them mumbling to themselves because they might be like planning something. Are they staring at you? It means they're thinking, you know, like she's basically sort of saying, hey, this is how you keep safe as a nurse and address if there's going to be an issue with a patient acting out. But she says, hey, if there's ever we've got a code word, right, hula hoop, say that if you're ever, like, you know, in danger and we'll respond, right? That's something she says. They don't explain that to her and therefore to us, the audience, if we're not having a hula hoop later in the season. That is an absurd sentence to say, but that's the code word they've given me. Hula hoop. Chekhov's hula hoop will be unleashed at some point, maybe late in the season, so we'll see where that goes. But that is me. Thank you very much for joining me. I do appreciate it. You can, of course, support all the content over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV or via YouTube membership. Thanks to everyone who already does. I'll see you guys next time for episode 2. Thank you for joining me. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?